Welcome into the latest episode of the Betting the Pitch podcast presents Formula One Racing. I'm at the real underscore G Warner across all social media platforms, Facebook, nope, not there, but Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Patreon, of course. And of course, always by Angel. You can find her on Twitter at Roscoe, Roscoe, Poop Scoop, inside the F1 world. If you're into that sort of thing, you'd understand who Roscoe is at Angel. How are you feeling on this Friday morning? We're in a weird kind of space where there's no available lines on Bet Online, but I have found lines to win the race elsewhere. How are you feeling, Angel? We got a big week of F1 coming up.
I'm feeling great. I'm so happy. Like now, all the races are kind of in our time zone for us to watch now. That's so we finally finish all the Asia races, right? China, Australia, China, Japan, and last week Bahrain. It was a lot easier to watch, and Saudi is a few hours behind, so you can get lunch on Sunday and just watch the race. It's perfect.
You can
I'm
get
excited.
lunch. You can actually eat or feed yourself on our
Yes.
time zones. That is a nice upgrade. Thank you F1 for finishing your I guess Eastern Asia swing because I think Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
is still technically Asia. I do have a map behind me. It's not that I'm a worldly person, but um, so let's talk Bahrain. We saw an interesting race. I'll just let you kick us off before we get into Saudi Arabia lines and etc. I'm also going to be frantically refreshing in the background trying to find some updated numbers. But tell me about what you saw in Bahrain and what you think about how that impacts maybe this week.
Yeah, Bahrain, it was so interesting. It was such a fun race to watch, just given all how dynamic things are changing on the track. I think we had Oscar Piastri being the pole position, and he actually finished, right? That wasn't a surprise because my client just have the best car and he just took off from the beginning and doesn't have any dirty air from the cars in the front, so it just zoom and disappeared, right?
Zoom,
But I
zoom,
think
no dirty air for Oscar Piastri, who did win
yeah.
the race. Second place, George Russell of Mercedes. Third place, McLaren teammate of Oscar Piastri was Lando Norris. Fourth, Charles Leclerc. Fifth, Lewis Hamilton, who you might know from at Roscoe Poop Scoop and that Twitter handle if you're familiar. Okay, so no dirty air. Oscar Piastri took the pole, hung on for the race, winning by looks like nearly 16 seconds. What do you think from Oscar in the race? What do you think? Was it an easy race for him because he's certainly emerged as a much more he's the favorite in Saudi Arabia. I'll cut to the chase.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think from the beginning, we knew he's in the best car, and to be honest, I like if we look at the quality, Lando made a mistake, right? And that's kind of how this whole season gonna be. Like you're gonna see between Oscar and Lando, who are sitting in the best car and who's truly just a calm and put together driver and truly deliver the weekends in and out with perfection. And I think Oscar just like did a phenomenal job in Bahrain weekend. And Lando made a mistake, and he had to kind of like take on the mistake. I think his quality position was a lot behind six or seven. But he did finish in number three, which is great. And just compare Japan and the Bahrain, you see how dynamic the quality position versus the race results, right? And I do want to highlight in the Bahrain weekend, um, George quality number three, finished number two, Leclerc quality number four or number three, finish number three, right? Wait, finish number four. And at some point, the battle between Lando and the Charles Leclerc was quite interesting. And that was very much towards the end, same as Lando and George Russell. So I think all of this is just shows very I guess, very precise game, right? This is a very precise sport we're looking at, and George kind of proven himself over the past few weeks, and Charles Leclerc is definitely upcoming in the rank as well, right? Because it seems like he's getting more comfortable in the Ferrari car, and with a new floor, it helps. Um, so I think that just kind of give us a little bit indicator going into the Saudi weekend is I think we're looking at a few competitor in the top five.
Great. So I think to just restate what you said so far. So early races in Eastern Asia, way before lunchtime here in the United States, it seemed that the qualifying was not as important in terms of the finishing of or the final positions in the race. But as we get deeper in these races, or maybe specific to Bahrain and maybe Saudi Arabia, are you saying that qualification is that much more important because it's much harder to overtake someone who starts ahead of you?
No, I think that was the case for Japan for sure. Quali, where you finish, right? There was only one change in top 10. But coming to Bahrain, coming in Saudi, it's just more dynamic. So qualification doesn't necessarily say where you're gonna finish. It's a lot more about your team strategy, a lot more about your sort of speed, sort of your tire management, and a lot about um just overall sort of the mistakes, right? I think that's especially true for Saudi as compared to Bahrain. And we talk about Bahrain's characteristics in terms of the track. It's very abrasive in terms of like you have all the sand being in desert, sands coming over, and so it eats up your tire quite much, right? So the tire degradation, and you see couple cars in like all of them pretty much went on pit stop for 3 times and changed the tire 3 times because soft it just can't last long, and the hard doesn't work well in terms of the temperature. Max hit it, Lewis hit it in the race in Bahrain. So there was a lot of tire strategy play into Bahrain, but for Saudi, what's a little bit different is it's a street track, so it's still gonna be abrasive, but not as much as a Bahrain. But the street track looking at Monaco, street track looking at Singapore, street track looking at our first race, Australia Grand Prix, right? So one of the characteristics of a street track is that it's very fast. It has long speed line in Saudi, and it has very sharp corner, so it does not forgive any small mistakes you're gonna have because you are in fact, I think Jeddah is the fastest track of all tracks in F1. Faster than Monza, faster than Spa, faster than Silverstones. So, and even faster than Australia, which is a really fast track. But all that said, I think I'm probably gonna give away a little hints here. Is I think we have quite many rookies this season, and I don't know how would rookie perform with like they won't be forgiven of any minor mistakes.
Got it. So we've just found out Twitter's Roscoe Poop Scoop might be a little bit ageist on this episode, but we'll get there in a second. Thank you for all of you that have been listening to our F1 podcast so far on the Betting the Pitch Podcast Network. You can find the podcast Betting the Pitch on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify at the Real _ G Warner for the the YouTubers among us. And of course, I will be trying to make sure I get a 1 minute Instagram video out there and a YouTube short at the Real _ G Warner on both those platforms with our picks for this episode. Um, and I guess for future races in the Asian, we probably wait till after the qualifying if it's so important. But it's something that I'm definitely learning as we go through this F1 schedule. One thing I'd like to know before we get into the Saudi Arabia prices is based on the Lando Norris mistake in qualification that got him the third or fourth slot entering into Bahrain. How do you think that impacts? We've been talking a lot on this show about how McLaren has had two drivers as opposed to
Mhm.
really favored one favorite, as you'd see with Red Bull, for example, with Max Verstappen, and then whoever the heck's in the other car. It seems so far this season. It seems like McLaren treats that much more differently. You've highlighted that McLaren has the best car for this entire show, as has been on the air. How do you think that Oscar Piastri winning in Bahrain impacts the Lando Norris and his kind of tussle for the most prominent driver at McLaren? Does that impact strategy? Do you think McLaren is seeing that maybe Oscar Piastri is the future and is also the present now? How does that? How do you feel like McLaren as a team are thinking about this?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually read something online. I don't know how true the
Everyone
how
has an
true
opinion
the
online.
the
Yes,
statements
indeed.
are. But rumor on the streets, well, we all know Oscar Piastri just signed a multi-year contract. And I think this rumor was even around before he signed the contract as of last year because but I think the rumor on the street has like there's a clause in his contract saying if mathematically both Oscar and Lando have the same have mathematic possibility to get the championship, McLaren cannot favor Lando over Oscar Piastri, and that's part of the clause as Oscar Piastri's multi-year contract. So I think that just sets a tone a little bit different from other team, right? You're gonna have Red Bull obviously favor Max, and between Ferrari, depending on the days, you're gonna have them favor Charles over Hamilton, probably because Charles is a longer term sort of a driver for Ferrari as compared to Hamilton. But all that said, it's not going to be the case for Oscar and Lando, in my opinion. Especially now they only have 3 points apart from each other in the championship, right? Even though
Yeah, so
Lando is
I'll
still leading.
I'll read the standings. So Lando Norris first on 77 points, just one win, but has had four podiums. Oscar Piastri on 74. His teammate just 3 points behind, as Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter just mentioned. Two wins for Piastri, only three podiums. Verstappen, 69 points. George Russell, 63. Then a huge drop off to Leclerc at 32. Antonelli, 30. Lewis Hamilton, 25. Partly because Ferrari got disqualified from one of the races. But that's what we got. And that feels like a pretty big gap after only this many races so far. Um, and I guess that probably speaks to more our first episode when we were talking about the full season odds for the Drivers' Championship winner as opposed to the Constructors' Championship, as it looks like McLaren is pretty far ahead at this point, to say the least. I think it's probably time to get into the Saudi Arabia lines. Like I said, I'm still frantically refreshing in the background, but I don't know. They've taken numbers down. I don't know if there's been some drastic change. It might see these odds change, but I guess we're looking at a little bit odds that
We
I've
moving the money line here?
I'm not sure what's going to happen here. I don't think that Nico Hulkenberg is going to be favored though when the lines come back. I'll put it that way. So we'll start with just get an idea, which this is a pretty big change. Oscar Piastri favored to win Saudi Arabia. I've seen in other places about equal price with his teammate Lando Norris. But the lines that I grabbed was Oscar Piastri plus 110 to advance, or excuse me, to win the race in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Implied probability of nearly 48%. Lando Norris at plus 160 is about 38%. Max Verstappen all the way up to 11 to 1 odds is gigantic from what I've been looking at. Other places have around 9, as we suggest on all podcasts that I appear on, whether it's Major League Baseball at Pregame Now on Twitter or any podcast I do on this network. Shop around for the best price because ultimately most sports books might be dealing something different. They all have different, slightly different, I would say, exposure to races and to any sport you really talk about. George Russell 11 to 1, so matching Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc 16 to 1, Lewis Hamilton 22 to 1, dropping to Kim Antonelli at Kimi at 45 to 1, and then we get to real long shots, which doesn't seem like that's going to happen too much this year. What do you think, I guess, about the odds change to making Oscar Piastri even with Lando Norris or even more likely to win the race, depending on where you're looking?
Yeah, I think this is probably in a result. I mean, it's a result of Bahrain, I think, right? Because he just finished so strong, 16 seconds ahead of George Russell, and just disappear, like we said in the beginning, right? Um, but I mean, I think if we recall a couple episodes ago, I still think even between Lando and Oscar, it's truly a 50-50. Like who's gonna finish ahead of each other, right? That being said, I think on the weekends, the first few races we have Lando always favor on the batting line over Oscar, which I think that ultimately just in my basic math mind is Oscar has a higher value because in my mind it's always 50-50. But going into this weekend, looking at actually Oscar favor over Lando, which make me kind of wanting to double check Lando again because
Mm.
again in my mind it's basic math. It's 50-50, and whoever have a lower chance, it just means more value.
Totally. Positive expected value, as they'd say in the biz. Looking at Australia, we had Lando Norris plus 170, implied probability of 37%. Oscar Piastri plus 675 was only about 13%. So 24% gap there in Australia. It dropped pretty significantly to about 9% in Japan. In Bahrain, it went to about 10%. But now we flipped Oscar Piastri, now the favorite in the clubhouse or in the driver house or whatever in the shop. And that's, I think, a big change and signifies performance. Is 16 seconds that a big enough gap that you think it's going to change opinions that all of a sudden F1 fans, bettors, everything across the world think that Oscar Piastri is a better driver than Lando?
Yeah, I think finishing 16 is quite big, right? Like you have a lot, I can't recall other races. You have some other races like you finish quite close. I think Japanese between Lando and Max, they were very close, right? They
Yeah,
were like
so
trying to
Lando
fight
is
in the end.
1.5 seconds or so behind Verstappen. Piastri about zero point 0.7 seconds behind Lando Norris in that one. We're looking at China in Shanghai, and it looks like Lando was about 10 seconds worse than Piastri. In Australia, we have Piastri finishing ninth, 20
Yeah.
seconds behind Lando Norris, the champion in the debut race of 2025 Formula One.
Yeah, but all that said, I just feel like Oscar was just such a dominant performance in Bahrain that really sets him apart on the money line. And the other piece maybe is just really the contract. He has a multi-year contract now, right? Which just McLaren as a team is quite invested in him. So you wouldn't be
Are you familiar with Lando's contract for his the length of
Yeah,
time
I
and such?
wonder if his contract is like up for negotiation.
So and we do have lines of Bet Online now. I don't know if we just found a way to. I guess there's a deadline
Yeah,
today at noon Eastern time. It looks like, but and they do have Oscar Piastri plus 145. So he is a slightly better price than what I've been quoting from CBS Sports Line. I guess better odds if you shop around, but still Oscar Piastri slightly implied probability better than Lando Norris. Looks like Oscar Piastri at plus 145 to Lando Norris plus 155 is a difference of about point 0.4 no, excuse me, 1.6%, if I do the math off the top of my head. So very close, but still a sea change for Lando to be less likely to win than Oscar Piastri. Go ahead.
yeah. I was gonna say, I mean we're in the number five race of the season, so we do have a lot reference points, right? And in my mind, Saudi just from a track characteristics perspective is a lot similar to Australia, right? Street track, very fast. It's faster than Albert Park. Um, so that being said, I think, looking at obviously the race result is less referenceable, for Australia given it's a wet condition. But if we look at quality, Lando took the pole position, and I think that can be a big reference point going into the Saudi weekend. I do think McLaren gonna potentially take the pole, and if between these two, I would probably go for Lando taking the pole.
Okay, before we get there, so we do have some comments coming in from at Joe Dollar, a longtime Patreon subscriber. If you're interested in trying to get more picks, and actually, if you download the app, turn on notifications, you can get a little buzz every time I lock something in across baseball and, of course, a very heavy soccer season to crush the last month or so of the year. Check out patreon.com/surreal_G Warner. But let's go, and I guess just some comments that have come in. Please, if you could leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify under Betting the Pitch, throw some comments in there or find ways to hit me up at the real_G Warner across any social media platform. These mostly came in on Patreon. But Joe came through with his F1 plays for this week. And I'd love to get at Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter to hear her opinion. So he likes Antonelli top 6, Albon top 10, Mercedes both top 6, as he had suggested last week, which did not work out, and Max top 3. Any opinions? I'm happy to go and repeat if that's helpful. Maybe we'll start with what do you think about Kimi Antonelli finishing top 6?
Last week he truly had the chance. Like I'm not like I know we picked a Mercedes top six, and I do think he had a chance, and with the safety car that kind of screwed him over, right? He
Ooh,
just pit
go ahead.
it
Tell
and
tell us about that. So why did the safety car, which you'd think they were trying to be safe with a safety car, but maybe not.
it was a safety decision, but so I think it was Yuki and Carlos Sainz got into each other, which is not bad. Like not too sort of bad of a result. They touched each other in very high speed F1 track. So that caused a little bit damage and debris on the track, which is very unsafe to the tires on already abrasive track, right? So they had to put a yellow flag and pick up the debris. So in that yellow flag, which I guess we haven't touched on this podcast, is typically how F1 works is during the yellow flag, everyone stop slow down the speed, right? So when you slow down the speed, you basically have 10 seconds benefits or to pit stop over a regular race. During the regular race, it takes like about 30 seconds to pit and change your tire and come out, right? Or 28, depending on the track.
Mhm.
But some during the yellow flag when you pit, it's a 10 seconds less. So all that said, when you come out, you may still resume your same position or come back in like a little bit behind, but you're gonna basically start on the same position, track position, and just start on the track again, right? Not from the starting line, but just track position
Sure,
starting.
sure.
So all that said, Kimi Antonelli pitted before the safety. So he lost, and then you have like a Lando, you have I think Charles Leclerc, Hamilton, and everyone else pitted again. So they went in and pit again and come out with fresh tire, and Kimi was pitted and in the very behind the pack, and then he had to go in pit again, which I think was a strategic mistake on the Mercedes side because if he didn't pit, he would gain the track position. So I didn't think the safety sort of safety car play in his favor. I mean, that's kind of why he didn't finish in top. If I were Mercedes, I probably wouldn't pit him in the during the safety car and try to prioritize the track position, given he's already having a pretty young tires.
Hmm.
Um,
So that
so
sounds like to me some either driver or leadership mismanagement there. And
yeah,
unfortunately, those things do matter, especially in a race that gets decided when it's 16 seconds is a long gap with a
yeah.
pit time that's about double that. Pretty significant. which does also, since the safety car came out, that does cash Joe Dollars minus 150 bet last week when he said that there would be a safety car that would be on the race. So kudos to him for that selection. Just to give some numbers now, as we've got more coming out on Bet Online, the normal odds provider of this sports betting podcast at the real underscore G Warner across all social media platforms and betting the pitch on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Looks like Kimi Antonelli minus 135 for a top six finish. So a little bit of I guess expectations there for Kimi. Maybe will be a little bit better with pit strategy in terms of I guess some top 10 finishes. Name that we haven't talked a lot about, and that is Alexander Albon minus 160 to finish top 10. What's your thoughts on him? We rarely touch on the smaller drivers or smaller teams, and Alexander Albon certainly qualifies for that.
Yeah, I think in William, Carlos Sainz went there from Ferrari end of last season, right? Alex had been there for a few years.
And that's
Um,
because Lewis Hamilton was coming to Ferrari. They needed to free up a spot. I can't imagine most drivers are going, yeah, let's leave Ferrari for Williams.
yeah, yeah, he didn't have a choice. I mean, he had a choice in where he would go. He didn't have a choice to stay there,
Right,
in
right.
Ferrari. But I do think William is really an upcoming constructor, right? It's definitely on my list to watch for next season for sure. And this season they already doing a lot better than the past few years. Um, and I between Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, I just think one of them will probably be in top 10, probably not both of them,
Okay.
because another midfield constructor to watch is actually Alpine. Pierre Gasly had been doing great. Just this morning, I think the practice is going on. He's been doing pretty good in the free practice just now. Um, so all that said, I would pick one of the two William driver in the top 10. So the question is it Alex or is it Carlos, right?
So Alexander
Um,
Albon minus 160, a much more expensive top 10 finish than Carlos Sainz at plus 105.
Okay. And in that case, actually, I would go for Carlos because I want that nice surprise. He's been with the team for 5 races, 4 races, and this is going fifth. Last race, he was doing really well, and except he got into with Yuki a little, right? He had to actually retire his car. So the odds haven't been in his favor, literally for the past few races. Um, and I think he may come back
So I'm
pretty strong.
guessing because practice is going on, that might be why we didn't have lines, and that might have swung things a little bit, and thrown
Gotcha.
some places off. But forgive me for not keeping to the Jeddah timeline and schedule. So I think last thing on the list is that we actually would have numbers for. It seems like the team numbers are not out, maybe due to the practice stuff as well. But if they come out before we sign off today, I will certainly try to do my best to get that out. Top three finish for Max Verstappen plus 125 is out there. Looks like Lando Norris minus 500, so 1 to 5 or 5 to 1 on. Same for Oscar Piastri. George Russell plus 115, a slight favorite to finish top three to Max Verstappen. Do you agree with that? I mean, the odds have increased significantly for Max Verstappen for this race to win it. And George Russell and he are both about the same, though it's kind of weird to me to see Max Verstappen getting this little respect.
Um, I I feel him. Right? I think he's definitely one of the best drivers on the track. He just doesn't have the car,
Mm,
unfortunately. And I
mm.
think his manager actually called an urgent meeting with the Red Bull advisor, which essentially is very high up decision maker. And also the team principal last week after the Bahrain because they were just not happy with the car. And I don't know what this discussion went into it. And in the driver interview yesterday, Max said like he didn't think this will change his season's mentality and he's gonna stay with Red Bull. He's focusing on the racing. Um, but I'm sure there are discussion behind the scene on whether the specific terms and the clause of their contracts and if they can breach it if Red Bull doesn't deliver the car, right? But all that said, I'm not impressed by the Red Bull, the car. I'm impressed by Max as a driver. But in a weekend like this, you have to combine both, right? You 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 can't expect Max to win in a tractor on the F1 track, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not
Unfortunately,
saying Red Bull car like is a tractor, but when you compare that with a McLaren or a Mercedes, um, it's not as fast.
you heard it.
So
You heard it here first at Roscoe Poops Tube, Roscoe on Twitter. She just gave out, or she just labeled the Red Bull F1 vehicle a tractor. Maybe it might be behoove them to use gasoline instead of Red Bull to in the gas
right.
tank as well. So we're moving into the later portion of the show. I want to make sure to get our picks out there for everyone who's been listening this whole time. We're still a couple weeks away since our double win on Max Verstappen's win and trying to return to the winner's circle. But there's a lot of options out there. I want to make sure, since we're kind of getting lines on the fly, we have top three out there, top six for driver individuals, even top 10 as discussed, or a few of these. Don't have any team lines out there to cite just yet. Of course, you can pick a Saudi Arabia winner as well at Roscoe's Poop Poop or Angel. Which would you like to go with? If you like, feel free to give me something, and I'll shout out some numbers towards you if you need them.
Um, so I said George Russell finished top three last week, and he actually finished number two, which was pretty good.
That
I
will
think,
that will win for at Angel Zhang. Unfortunately for me, I did not get the top three Mercedes. It's all because of that pit decision. A
yeah,
safety car screwed me. I'm gonna complain till next week.
yeah. But I think it just also looking at the like in the beginning of the episode, I was saying like looking at the top four truly maybe it's a more of a second to the fourth in the last weekend. It's actually quite close, right? Lando battle with Charles, Lando battle with George. Um, so I still think Lando and the Oscar are probably gonna be the two of the top three. But my pick this week for the other top three is actually Charles,
Ooh,
over
Charles
George.
Leclerc to finish top three. Let me get a number on this one since that's my job here. Charles Leclerc plus 135 to finish top three.
What's a George sort of money
So George
line?
Russell plus 115, Max Verstappen plus 125, Charles Leclerc plus 135. So effectively in the top three odds, it looks like Lando and Piastri are tied for first. George Russell expected to finish third, Max Verstappen fourth, Charles Leclerc fifth, Lewis Hamilton a pretty deep gap to sixth at plus 375.
So in that case, I actually solidify my pick in a way. Like I still think there's more value in Charles Leclerc finish top three. I think it's I mean last week again he was getting used to sort of the new floor and everything. And to be honest, I think Ferrari screwed up like the strategy call. Like I expected, I was impressed with their beginning of the call, start with the medium and going on soft, and they definitely got the track position. But later when Max complained the whole track, whole race, like how shitty hard tire was, and then they end up hitting Hamilton and Leclerc on hard, which I don't know why. Like I cannot comprehend that part. But which led to Lando overtook Charles Leclerc in the third position. Um, so again, I hope Ferrari team garage learned the mistake from last week and really kind of like put their mind together and make a decent call. I'm not expecting a like dramatic like out of like blue sort of a smartest call ever. Just make a decent strategy call, and I think Leclerc can be in top three.
Got it. Hey, this is real_G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. If you've been listening to the Betting the Pitch F1 podcast, you know at Roscoe Poop Scoop by now. She's super hot. She's won her last two picks, with George Russell finishing top three in Bahrain, and we both grabbed Max Verstappen to win in Japan. Well, on this week's episode, Angel is going with a different top three finisher. That is Charles Leclerc at plus 135 for her best bet. For mine, I'm the real_G Warner across all social media platforms, including Patreon. If you want picks across soccer and baseball, check that out, patreon.com/real_G Warner. But for my pick on this episode, yes, he might have made a mistake in qualifying last weekend, but we've seen a big sea change from the forever favorite Lando Norris, now less favored to win the race, to his teammate Oscar Piastri. Well, I'll take the extra odds on Lando Norris to win the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. So grab Lando Norris plus 155 and Charles Leclerc to finish top three at plus 135 for this episode. And that'll do it. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great Friday. Enjoy the second, free practice. And we'll be back next week to discuss the next F1 race at Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter at the real_G Warner. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.